Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello, it's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 178 of the Cognitive Podcast, and I am broadcasting here from the Prius of Love. How's everybody doing? It is a cloudy Sunday afternoon. It's beginning to break up now. It was very cold, so I sit here in a turtleneck and a very heavy sweater, the Mad Skills Mammoth sweater, and the Foxen skirt made of flannel, full circle skirt with a petticoat underneath it, made of simply adorable printed cotton, 2 pairs of woolen socks. You can hear the kind of day it's been. So let's get right on here, shall we? Your comments are very welcome. You can comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com or on our group on Ravelry. Speaking of the comments, our buddies over at Oink Pigments have said, and this is quoted in the show notes because I'm so happy about it, you are on the Oink Pigments calendar as well. You have actually been on the calendar the whole time. She put this on our group thread for information for CFR 10. So she said, I'm just finally replying to this thread, LOL. Can't wait to see everyone again. We will definitely be doing an exclusive colorway again. Also, if there are any requests for specific things, feel free to drop them here or email us yarn@oinkpigments.com so we can make sure to bring them for you. And there is a link to her email in the show notes where I have this quote. I have to tell you, last year I ordered a sweater's worth from Lisa Souza. So happy I did that, and I picked it up at the retreat. So guys, you can do that. Meanwhile, we are happy that our buddies at Oink will be back. I believe Laser Sheep and Lisa Souza have also confirmed. Then there was Sal Pal, who's worried when I said, hey, I'm going to give away my knitting books or my crocheting books. Oh, but copyright, if you say you're scanning them first. That's a gray area, but I can't disagree with you for mentioning it because you never know with copyright. It can be a very, very touchy issue. The good news is, though, we don't have to worry because that plan went by the wayside. I'm just way too busy to work on that kind of thing. Now, I worked at Kinko's. Those of you who are old enough to remember Kinko's, the copying place, to put myself through grad school for psych. So I am the one human you know who can do spiral binds and various other binds. However, I don't have the equipment and I don't really have the time. So I don't think that's going to happen. But thanks anyway. It is worth considering, though. I don't really care so much about copyright per se because I think it's broken so many times. I've found my own works reproduced all over the internet and have never sued anybody yet. But I do have a lot of sympathy for the designers because they're just getting cheated. And, you know, every time there's a viral pattern, it pops up on some place like, you know, one of the major big box yarn companies without saying names so I don't get sued. So I do think it is a worthwhile question from the perspective of we don't want to cheat other designers. We don't want to harm our own because they're having enough problems. So in the meantime, let's see. Oh, the link to the information thread for Cognitive Fiber Retreat number 10 in 2024, September 28th. That is all under that nice link that says all info is right here, and here is a link. That is the info thread on Ravelry, so that will take you right over if you want to know what I'm talking about when I talk about the wonder of Oink and Laser Sheep and Lisa Souza coming back for 2024. That's what we're talking about. Get those yarn orders in. It's a nice place to pick them up. Meanwhile, what you may be asking, is on my hooks and needles. Well, I'm really a little confused these days because I've got so many little teeny things going. Some of them are very experimental, but I'm starting to try to harden them off into this is actually a project that I'm doing. So the good news, I did finish the first sock of the Lydia's Pinks. You can see a picture of it there. I am hiding my foot in my clog to cover the fact that the leg is in the beautiful Lydia's Pinks and the foot and heel are not. As I've said before, I made those in a yarn that I know is hard wearing because I wanted to preserve the Lydia's Pinks for where it will be seen. And I don't want it to wear out. I really like it. All right, now, the interesting thing here. Last year, of course, you may remember, those of you who did CFR 23, I asked people to do sample yarn trades, mini skeins in sock yarn. And I said 25 grams. That's way, way too big. And our dutiful friend, Chris alias Cutiful Christina of Cutiful Yarns, amazingly generously sent us all a free sample in 25 grams. This initiated frenzy on my part as I tried to trade during the mini skein trades to get any of these I could because I love them. And I got 2 of these beautiful pink and purples in the Lydia's Pinks. I have to tell you, these things are extraordinarily generous. I'm not altogether sure that I couldn't have gotten a whole pair of socks. Certainly a children's socks I could have, but I'm a size 9 foot. Even so, I have a lot of that first skein left over. So yeah, it's going to show up in some of my stripy socks later. But I want to thank whoever handed that off to me because these are going to be gorgeous. And one is now finished. This evening I fully plan to sit down and cast on the second sock because I don't have second sock syndrome. Meanwhile, you may remember the green scrappy wristers. Ooh-yee, I had a battle with these, and it's not for the reasons you'd think. This is a good pattern. This is right off the Lion Brand site, and it's free. And the problem is you increase on the side away from the thumb gusset. Now, that's not a problem, except for some reason it became a problem on this one. It's because I'm using a Canadian import sock yarn by a French designer, a French Quebecois. I don't remember the person's name, I have to admit. It is simply stunningly beautiful. However, it is mostly silk, and splitty hardly begins to describe the trauma. So yeah, you can see on the right side of the picture where the increases are. It looks a bit chewed up. This was just challenging, so it took me way too long to do this. However, the second one is already up to the gusset increases. And frankly, I'm just going to sit down probably next weekend and crank it out and be done with these. Despite the somewhat chewed up look, these are very handsome. And I am pleased to have just gotten through a lot more of this scrap sock yarn. I'm seriously thinking I will knit the next few of these types of scrappy wristers because that pattern just about made me insane. Now, the last time I used that pattern, I used it very successfully with some single ply, I can't remember the name, Madeline Tosh. And they came out just great. But if you have any kind of splitty yarn, this is kind of purgatory on wheels, this pattern. But they are good, they are very warm, they are quite handsome. So you can see the first of these wristers right there under finished. In progress, the Stash Toss 2024, 13 in versus 34 skeins out. And you can see the list of the projects. As I've already mentioned, 2 of them, I'm still working on the sock yarn cowl because I do at most half of a round a day, So it's going very slowly because I'm just not working on it. It's something I keep on my desk. I did get serious about the crochet block experiments, and these are the 2 bigger developments. I finally admitted that I love the granny squares I've been making, and I've been using just the predictable granny square pattern, cluster 3, chain 1 or 2, and so on. And I just realized I have enough of them and looked up the pattern I want. That will be the Lakeside cardigan, and I will be shortening it considerably. This, again, is more of a coatigan. I don't like coats. out of crochet too much. If you remember the Wrapped in Tiny Chains cardie that I made a while back, that's about as long as I'm ever going to want a cardie to be. And it's very handsome and it's doing its job. But I do want a kind of droopy, oversized cardie of granny squares. So you can see the color combinations. I am making the squares all different colors of those 4 central colors, and then each square is edged in that cream. Meanwhile, I also decided to use up my sunburst squares, and I decided to use them for the classic granny square body bag. Now, those of you who were at CFR 23 will remember our friend from the OC, whose name I can't remember, and this is embarrassing, because she was giving everybody these little bags. And she said she makes them and she gives them away for free, just so people know there's love in the world. Well, you know what? You gotta love her. And I love the bag. In fact, I am wearing it even as I speak to you here in the Starbucks parking lot. And I love the bag, but the bag is getting a lot of wear and tear. So I realized I may someday have to replace the bag. Enter the pattern I just told you about, the classic granny square body bag. This is across the body, not a bag you put a human body in, just in case you were wondering. But this is so mindlessly easy. It is 4 granny squares. I used 6-inch squares. I haven't even really read the pattern. I'm looking at the beautiful bag I already have from my friend from the OC. As it happens, yesterday morning, I was looking at the bag and said, what will I do when this wears out? And then realized, are you nuts? You've got like 7 of these sunburst squares sitting right in front of you on the desk. I picked up 4 of them, laid them out, said, how would you assemble this? And about 10 minutes later, I had the body of the bag assembled. Then I thought, okay, so I made the Ravelry pattern a part of my projects. I made it official. And I said, but what about linings and zippers? Well, I have a zipper. This was a while back in Joann Fabrics. They were selling zippers. I think it was buy 3, get 2 free. So yeah, I did. I'm a seamstress. Zipper, gonna use it. And I bought them this size because I had that purse with me, and I thought someday I may want to make these purses. So I have the zipper, and then I thought, well, what do I do for the liner? And then I realized I have all these scrap giant squares. Joann Fabrics, again, every now and then they just put bundles of leftover fabric they have. They cut it into big squares, fat quarters, and they put them on sale for a good price. So I buy them when I see them on sale because, you never know. Well, I looked at them and said, good Lord, all I got to do is take one of these, trace the purse, cut the pattern out on the fabric, and sew it up. So, moral of the story, I still have to get the hardware, and I still have to do the strap. But that's okay. I can do everything using my bag that I already possess, that I got at CFR last year, as my model. So I wouldn't be looking for either of these 2, the classic granny square bag or the Lakeside cardigan, to be finished anytime soon. I tend to do about a block a day, at least on the Lakeside. I'm a bit ahead on that, but I'm not tracking. I need to get to 64, and I think I've got about 17 of them. And it's going along nicely, but I refuse to put interest or effort into it. They're just a pile of blocks on the floor, much the way Blanket's own blanket once was. And as for the bag, there's no rush. I don't need it right now. I will probably take a long weekend and just sit down and mess around with it. But I have to admit, having the other bag as a model has been extraordinarily helpful. Dizzy Blondes, nope. A strategy. Well, I'm back. It's Dr. Gemma again, and I'm now at home in the study of love. And by the way, it is April 14th, 2024. We just paid our income taxes. Yay! That saga is over. And now it is 7:58 p.m. And I'm a bit liquored up on my Starbucks latte. So I'm feeling really good. So let's talk about a strategy. And I want to talk about the culture of addiction and the strange ways it's playing out a bit for us. Now, this is very topical and related to my world, but I do think it's important to hear because of something my husband said. I was talking to him this week and I said, I'm having all these urges for food and I'm beginning to realize My behaviors sound like the behaviors of an addict. Now, my husband has a marketing MBA from a very reputable program, from the iBear program at University of Southern California. A good one. He turned around and said to me, "But don't you realize our whole culture is based on addiction?" And I was really shocked. And he said, "Look, I'm in marketing. What do you think we're doing to people in marketing? What do you think the goal is? To make people believe they need the thing that they don't need." This sort of stunned me into silence. And the other thing that stunned me similarly is our head clinician. He was a very nice guy. And he's got a real thing about addiction. That was really his background training. I generally do not like working with addiction because I don't have enough empathy for it, which is kind of embarrassing but true. Remember, I have a lot of empathy for things like autism, cognitive disability, and strangely, survivors of mass tragedies. Those are what I do well. What I don't do well, addiction and couples therapy. You have to have better empathy for those than I have to work with them. So I guess it's not that surprising that I'm not as focused on addiction as I could be. But anyway, when our head clinician was talking about it this week, he pointed out, they've changed the standards for diagnosing addiction, which I did know. And in the current standard, there's 11 symptoms. And there are, number 10 and 11 have some qualifications. But you now determine the seriousness of the addiction based on how many symptoms are present. So if you go into our diagnostic manual and you look up alcohol addiction, or you look up cannabis addiction, you're going to find the same symptoms. They just use the word cannabis or alcohol. So I thought you might like to hear what those symptoms are like. And I'm just going to not use the keyword like alcohol or cannabis. I'm just going to say, here they come. Number 1, substance is often taken in larger amounts or over a larger period than was intended. Number 2, there is a persistent desire or unsuccessful efforts to cut down or control substance use. Number 3, a great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain that substance, to use it, or to recover from its effects. Number 4, craving or a strong desire or an urge to use that substance. Number 5, recurrent substance use resulting in a failure to fulfill major role obligations at work or school or home. Number 6, continued substance use despite having persistent or recurrent social or interpersonal problems caused or exacerbated by the effects of that substance. Number 7, important social, occupational, or recreational activities are given up or reduced because of the substance use. Number 8, recurrent substance use in situations in which it is physically hazardous. Number 9, substance use is continued despite knowledge of having a persistent or recurrent physical or psychological problem that is likely to have been caused or exacerbated by that substance. Number 10, tolerance of the substance as defined by either A, a need for markedly increased amounts of the substance to achieve the desired effect, or B, markedly diminished effect with continued use of the same amount of the substance. So in other words, you need more to get the high off it. Number 11, withdrawal, as manifested by either of the following. First, the characteristic withdrawal syndrome for that substance. And you have to go to the individual substance to look that up. Withdrawal is also manifested by the substance or closely related substance is taken to relieve or avoid withdrawal symptoms. Okay, so there are the 11 symptoms, and mild addiction is presence of 2 to 3, and moderate is the presence of 4 to 5, and severe is the presence of 6 or more. What really kind of blew my mind is by this scale, I'm addicted to carbs at the moderate level. I've got at least 5 symptoms. And so I looked at that and I thought, yeah, that's absolutely true. I overeat. That's number 1. I've tried to cut my overeating. That's number 2. I haven't been successful. Number 3, spending a lot of time thinking about food, locating food, or getting over eating too much food. And, number 4, strong craving for food. I have to say, the last symptom for me is a little bit more hazy, but I would have to go to number 9, say food is used inappropriately, despite knowledge that I have a persistent physical problem from it, that is diabetes. So there's my 5 that make me a moderate junkie. And that's all very true. Now, you can say, but you need food to live. Yeah, food is a little unusual this way. And I don't know if I'd say food or I'd say carbohydrates. I originally would have said carbohydrates, but I'm thinking even on a keto diet with limited carbs, I am overeating. So I wonder if it's food in general. And I'm not going to go into the sad and tragic tale of why I think that happened to me. There is one. There always is one. People do things for reasons, and they're usually pretty understandable. But the thing is, I'm a CogB therapist. So patients come into my office. They say, I want to know why I overeat. No, you don't. You don't want to know that. We can figure that out. In fact, I can probably tell it to you just based on my own experience as a clinician. After you give me all your history, I'm probably going to go, and here's why that happened, based on what you said in history. It's not why you're doing it. That's the common mistake we make in therapy. It's what am I going to do about it now? And the reason is, when we're searching for the why, it's not a foolish question. It's an ineffectual question. We search for the why, and then we feel like we have somebody to blame. It's not our fault, and everything's better now. And we stop working on the problem. Patients will literally leave your office when they figure out the why, and they just go, thanks, that's okay. Now I know, I'll just work with it. And that's not what they came to you for. So the reality is, everything in a successful course of therapy is going to be about, now what do I do? Not now who do I blame, or now I get it and so I can be angry at someone. That may all feel good. There's nothing particularly wrong, except you still need to fix the problem. And so I wanted to talk about addiction that way because I'm still reflecting on my husband's statement. Because when you look at it this way, most Americans are addicted to something. Now, the obvious one for the younger generations is video games. That they get in trouble all the time, missing school. In college, you have students failing classes. I've got a few of these on the caseload right now because they're doing this stuff. I have this one teenager, well, I don't have them anymore. I had this one teenager who was just fighting tooth and nail with her family because the family was demanding she do healthy things in high school. And she was trying to give it all up. I mean, varsity stuff that would get her into a good college, which was still her goal. She's given it all up so she can play video games. It really is that real a thing. But, that's the easy one. And that one is rooted in our younger generations have to live with the intrusive presence of computers and all that they bring, social media, video games, etc. And we older generations have to really work to figure out how to train them because we didn't have this problem. This is as new to us, really, as it is to them. So that's kind of the obvious one. The other easy ones, alcohol, cigarettes, THC, now that weed is legal in so many places at the state level. Those are the obvious. But there's shopping. There's shoe addictions. There was a famous dictator of the Philippines in my youth. His wife, when they deposed him, she had like 1,000 pairs of shoes in her closet. And what does that even mean? I don't know, but collections to the point of idiocy. So, I worry, I think, I can remember when a ball of yarn would fix everything for me. When I was having a bad day, if I just went to one of the local yarn stores and bought a ball of yarn, I was happy. Well, as a result, I've got so much yarn right now, which actually I can't say I regret. But it is why I'm working on my strategy to empty my stash via the stash toss. So what I'm really going for is, you might want to take a look at your life. If you're pre-diabetic, it's time to think about, are you carb addicted or just generically food addicted? And by the way, a significant percentage of all medical research in America is funded by the food industry. And that's why your doctor's probably not telling you about this. There's a whole lot of research on, is sugar addictive? Notice the doctors aren't saying that, even though pretty much the evidence is it is. Several doctors who tried to proclaim this had their careers ruined by the lawyers of guess which industry. And you can see this if you read the book by Gary Taub on sugar. and I cannot think of her name, but the book that she wrote that's really important on this is called Big Fat Lie. And you should probably look at these if you're pre-diabetic, if you're having trouble with a suspected food addiction. But also it's probably good to look at other possible addictions, such as, I hate to say this, you've got more stash than you can handle. I mean, you've got rooms given over to it, or you realize you're sabling everything and you're still buying. There are other addictions out there, apart from the obvious gambling, drinking, whatever addictions. And, then there's video games. There's time spent on video. It might be worth looking at this. Now, why am I bringing this up? Since I also just talked about overthinking. Addiction leads to stress. And that's really interesting. And we have no real dependable research yet, because we're still thinking about this. I mean, us in mental health, we're still thinking about this ourselves as researchers. One of the interesting places this cropped up, there's a woman who had uncontrolled bipolar disorder. She went on a carnivore diet. She claims it eradicated her needs for medication. Now, there's a lot of people, unfortunately, with bipolar out there who say they don't need medication. So this makes us all kind of cock our heads and wonder. At the same time, with low-carb, extreme keto, and carnivore, which is a subset of keto, it's even more extreme than keto, there are a lot of people who claim their mental health improved. And I don't think it takes a big leap of the imagination to say, so you have a kid and they're poor and their parents don't know how to feed them, and you give them a healthy diet. We know their mental health improves. That isn't even a question. I mean, it's almost stupid when you think about how many ways we've seen this. When people were freed from the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, they weren't real happy, okay? They also were starving. And here's a surprise, their mood improved when they were fed. So, I mean, this research moves from something that base level up into the more sophisticated areas. When people get off high-carb diets, they report reduced depression. When we talk about depression with patients, one of the things we advise against is sugary snacks. When I do crisis counseling after a disaster, one of the things you say to people who've been through a crisis, something like a mass shooting, if you can get them early enough, you say, do not drink sugary drinks, do not drink alcohol, not just because of the alcohol, but because alcoholic drinks also are high sugar. We tell people, stay away from the sugar. And it's because of the same thing, that if they drink easily digested sugars like alcohol or even just a lot of fruit juice, their sugar in their blood shoots up, which gives them a momentary high emotionally, and then it drops like a rock, because that's how glucose burns in the body, and they get a very deep low, very suddenly. So this is not rocket science, kids, that if you're eating a lot of sugar, if you're eating too many carbs, you are going to have this kind of rebound response of your sugar jumping up. You feel great, then your sugar dive bombs and you feel lousy. So the evidence hasn't been collated in one place as far as I know, as well as I would like it to be. But you do need to start thinking about this, that your diet is affecting your mood up to the point where, yes, you may actually have some kind of food addiction, whether it's carbs or whether it's, overall the way you eat or overeat. But there are many other ways to be addicted. The addiction that really bothers me overall, well, before the quarantine, I would have said we need things quick. Americans want everything quick. I need new clothes, I go buy new clothes. I don't mend the clothes. But then again, our clothing industry is quick. It's all fast fashion. They just roll it off, cheaply made, off some industrial line. And so when you walk around like I do wearing wool sweaters, you're surprised by how many people around you are cold and you're not. And you realize they're just wearing cheap, fast fashion made out of acrylic, usually in America. You don't see a lot of fast fashion in high quality things like wool or bamboo, do you? And it is really kind of shocking. And a friend of mine in Britain, and you know who you are, sent me this video about how the British clothing industry is giving into this. And they have this wonderful wool supply, but now they have, unfortunately, caught that fever of new clothes all the time, and they're running through clothing. In America, we have a problem with our landfills filling with clothing that does not biodegrade because it's made of chemicals, like acrylic is made of chemicals. And so people don't have high quality clothes. They're constantly spending on new clothes when they don't really need them. And then, of course, I always love that moment where someone looks at you when you're knitting in public and says, oh, look, a dying art form. That's bad news. But it is that need for quick that concerns me when I talk about addiction, because you can apply that to those addiction symptoms. The other one that concerns me since the quarantine is this addiction to having a problem, to diagnosing yourself with an illness. It's like that's the only way we get support and attention, by labeling ourselves. So if I've had a nickel, for every person who's walked up to me and said, I have OCD, let me tell you, you have to see these things clinically to know why I don't believe them. When you see the real thing, you won't be just diagnosing yourself because you tend to overthink. And that's the most common thing, is people who overthink will always tell me they have OCD. No, you don't have OCD. What you have is a lack of knowledge on thought stopping, thought substitution, and thought replacement by distraction. And that's what I've been saying for the last few weeks. So you might want to listen to those symptoms of addiction one more time. And you might want to start looking at the things you do more than other things. Playing D&D, that's why I knew people with that in college. I knew people who failed out of the Ivy League because they wouldn't stop playing D&D for hours at a time, living in a fantasy, as it were. And again, I could go on and on with these all night, but you might want to just think about this in the context of your own life. Just think, am I addicted to things? And what am I addicted to? And there's another one that springs to mind: attention seeking. A lot of people need to be seen, and that's where you're kind of verging into the personality disorders. But I'm not going to go there now, because half of you will hear the personality disorders and start saying, but that's me. And no, it's not, unless you're forced to an extreme. Everybody has traits of the PDs. Doesn't mean you have one. And please, let's not do that here and now. So you might want to look at addictions and addictive behavior in light of these qualifications that I gave you, in light of the symptoms. Now, if you think that you do have this, or you're seeing it in a family member, that's time to start talking to a professional therapist. It really is time to consider that. I don't want you to self-diagnose a form of addiction. Hey, Gemma, you self-diagnosed your own. No, I didn't. A medical doctor did when I found out I had diabetes. Get it? I don't want you to self-diagnose. Please talk to your physician or to a therapist. And let me tell you, as one of those critters, well, I'm a psychologist, kind of a step beyond that, but as one of those critters, I will send you to a physician to rule out anything that might be happening. So, for example, you get the little kid who's addicted to eating, well, the extreme example was paint chips. It's actually a mineral shortage. There are addictions that need to be medically addressed. So, yes, if you come to me and you say, I think I have this addiction, I'm first of all going to send you to a better addictions resource than I am personally, because I don't think I'm that great at it. But second, I am going to say you need to consult with a physician about this. Behavioral addictions, just a little bit harder. Physicians, they have some strange attitudes towards them. But like I said, this is how I want you to think about this. And I really do think if you're an overthinker, you might want to look, strangely enough, at, am I also addicted to an undesirable behavior? Maybe it's not as dangerous as an alcohol or heroin addiction, but it will certainly be disrupting your life. Okay, on to Offshoot. Well, I love this. I'm cycling along and I'm supposed to be at 30 minutes a day. I usually tend to do about 36 or 37. I passed the 290 mile mark now since late November. I feel really so much better, which is good because the weight loss, no, I'm plateaued. But I have to say, even my husband today said, your energy has been so much better. You've been so much happier. You've been so much more positive. Yeah, energy begets energy. So if you say you're low energy, I know it sounds weird, but you have to start using energy and your body will start wanting more and giving you more. And again, if you haven't been exercising, if you have any kind of health issue, you should talk to your doctor first. But also start small. Look, I had to really eat humble pie. I started cycling at 15 minutes a day because I realized that was all I was going to commit to. That's pretty embarrassing for a former marathoner. Pardon my oversized ego. But when you've spent 50 years running, you do feel like you deserve a little more credit. So it's really embarrassing when I say, yeah, and I went down to 15 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day feels good, but I crave more now. That's the way energy works. In the fluffy books, I'm not doing much there. I have been rereading, or rather re-listening to, the Beatrice Hyde Claire series by Lynn Messina, and I've talked about them enough that I don't really want to belabor that. Now that I'm listening to them, she wrote these over a series of years, as far as I can tell. The ones I'm re-listening to, I think she wrote these in like 2001, 2002. This is kind of old news for her, in other words, but she is still writing them. However, I realize listening to them now that they're much more tightly integrated with each other than I remembered. I was reading them spaced out, and I just wasn't remembering the contents of the previous books that well. Listening to them now at night, listening to them in rapid succession, I'm really hearing the connections and enjoying them. It's a fun series. There's nothing particularly socially redeeming about it. And the two lead characters are very 21st century in their way of looking at the world. You know, it's Regency, so there's nothing happening here with any kind of race or economic thing. What I think is interesting, though, and I think she does get very, very right, is she does talk about the male lead, the Duke of Kesgrave. She really does get into the head of the privileged when she talks about him. That she really does have B constantly noticing early in her marriage to him how he just takes privilege so much for granted, and he doesn't even see how much of it he has. And sometimes she uses that to her advantage, but a lot of times she's really confused or frustrated by it. Also, the books themselves, their timeline is in a very tight period of under 1 year, and there's something like 12 or 13 of them. So it is very interesting, and that's why you kind of want to follow the lines between the books. But I'm enjoying them. Nothing really challenging there. Something I really like, well, I bit the bullet. Since my medical situation's in a mess right now, and I don't mean the diabetes stuff, I mean my doctor's practice got fired by Blue Shield. So suddenly I have all these appointments lined up for June, and she's losing her Blue Shield credential. In fact, her whole practice is on June 1st. So I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do there. And this led me to rethink a lot of my stuff. Like, no wonder she knew it, and so she wasn't doing anything to help me. Her colleague, fortunately, did put me on metformin, and I've got a lot of refills, and even without insurance, metformin is cheap. And I want to keep taking it for quite a while because it does lower your sugar. Even the keto docs are like, yes, take your metformin. However, I started realizing that I have to take this more in hand. And again, she and her colleague should have both said, let's prescribe a glucose meter for you, and you can start measuring your glucose. No, of course they didn't, because these people are idiots. So anyway, I said, okay, go do it yourself. And I did a little looking around, and a patient who also tracks her stuff said to me, you should get a Keto Mojo meter. And I said, who's what now? Okay, Keto Mojo. So keto hyphen M as in Mary, O-J-O. Keto Mojo. They will sell you a meter that is based on a blood test, finger stick. Works just like my old glucose meter did when I first had diabetes, and I can't find the darn thing. And by the way, my current doctors don't even know I had a meter, so they didn't have to worry about prescribing it a second time, but they didn't. But my doctor in another practice had put me on a meter and then told me to get off it when I reached 5 pounds heavier than I am right now. However, I just realized I've got to meter myself, and I may not have to do it every day, but I definitely need to keep checking to make sure I'm not sending myself into glucose space. Now, the interesting thing is, when I first went keto, ketosis meters were few and far between, kind of unreliable. Well, they've gotten a lot better. So I like this meter because it comes with everything you need for the finger sticks, so you don't have to worry about that. Very easy to use, but you can prick your own finger, get a drop of blood for the glucose reading and a drop of blood for the ketone reading, and then the meter ties in very easily to a free phone application. No plan, no subscription, nothing. And the phone app will really interpret what you got. And this has been so amazing for me because, first of all, I found out my sugar readings are consistently in the normal healthy range. They're on the high end of it, but they are in the healthy range. This kind of blew my mind. But this is what happens when you get to the weight I'm at. I already knew this because 6 years ago, this was my first target rate because my doctor said, if you reach that, I'll take you off all the meds and you won't need to prick your finger. Then when I reached it, he made fun of me and said, you'll put it all on within a year because when you are diabetic, doctors treat you really disrespectfully because they say it's all your fault. Forget genetics, Anyway, my bitterness. And oh, by the way, they also say food is not an addiction. Carbohydrates, sugar, they're not addictions. Sure. So it ain't easy being diabetic, let me tell you, with the doctors I've met in California. But that's okay because now I'm looking at this and saying, you know what? I can meter myself. And it is really helpful. I used to hate doing this when I was first diagnosed 6 years ago. Now I don't even care because it is so satisfying to look at this and go, everything I'm doing is working. So, something I really like, the Keto Mojo glucose and ketones meter. It's a single meter for both. Now, why am I saying this to you? Because I know a bunch of you are pre-diabetic out there. And my husband has seen me using this, and he said, I think I want one. And I thought, you do. He's been in and out of the pre-diabetic range. I really think that this is an amazing thing to have in the public sphere because I think it's 61 or 62% of the American public, including children, are pre-diabetic. So you know what? If I were you, I'd take it over right now. When I was pre-diabetic, there was no education. There was no, here's what you need to do. Because, the doctors are blaming you for being a glutton instead of realizing you might be addicted. Now there's a lot more education. And I think one of the big things here is to take it into your own hands. The other thing you can do with this, and I highly recommend this, and every keto doc I've ever talked to recommends it. If you don't know about a food, eat it, wait an hour, and look at your blood. Because the interesting thing is, there's a lot of individual variation in how people respond to food, even when they're not diabetic. So I know when I first went keto, I was eating these keto protein bars. They were raising my blood sugar. And I finally realized it and gave them up. And so, there are a lot of keto products out there which are not keto because keto is never processed. You're eating whole foods, but these are all keto powders, keto drink mixes, blah, blah, blah. So fine, if you're going to use those, you have to be on your own journey here. Please use them if you want to, but you really should look at your blood right after you eat it, half an hour after you eat it, and an hour and 2 hours after you eat it. You really want to see what is this doing to my blood glucose, okay? So no, you don't have to be keto. No, you don't have to be diabetic, but you might want to look at this if you're pre-diabetic or if you're thinking about keto. The honorable mentions for something I really like. This is a book on sale at Joann Fabrics, of all things, and it just keeps cracking me up. Nobody is buying it. It's called The Gnocchi Horror Show. Gnocchi like the Italian potato dumpling. Okay, that's of course a pun on the Rocky Horror Show. I have no idea what this is, and I can't eat gnocchi because it's a potato, but every time I see this, I totally crack up. So if you look in the show notes, you can see a picture of the Gnocchi Horror Show. Put a lid on it. Yes, we do have a lot of things today. I was experimenting with keto pumpkin fritters. I would call these pumpkin pakora. These are delicious, and I do recommend them. Now, I didn't get it right the first time, but they were still great. I left out the Parmesan accidentally. My husband and I still scarfed them down yesterday. This is so ridiculously easy. The only thing you're going to have trouble with is the canned pumpkin puree. A lot of grocery stores in America don't carry that outside of Halloween season. I order this stuff routinely from Thrive Market because I also make the pumpkin spice earthquake cake, which is keto. But I'm just going to run it by you. The full recipe's in the show notes. This is so easy. A cup of canned pumpkin puree. The average can in America of that is 2 cups, so you could just double this and use the whole can. But anyway, with 1 cup of canned pumpkin, 2 large eggs, a 1/4 cup almond flour, a 1/4 cup minced green onions. I had to substitute in yellow onions, worked fine. a half teaspoon of ground cinnamon, salt and pepper to taste. I would have leaned more heavily on the salt than I did, which means nothing to you, but don't skimp on the salt. A quarter teaspoon ground nutmeg, a quarter cup grated Parmesan cheese. So just mix it all well and shape it into balls or fritters. Again, if I'd had the Parmesan, mine would have come out a little drier, which is what you need. Because you're going to fry these guys, and that's step 2. Fry them in at least 2 inches of olive oil or coconut oil. We used olive oil. It tasted great. This should make about 8 fritters or balls. I would smash them into fritters. I'd flatten them out. Each fritter is about 3 grams of carb. These were so good, but these are pakora. If you've ever had Indian food and you've ever had pakora, they're delicious. And these taste so much like pakora, it's not funny. So I would just call these pumpkin pakoras. You notice they're written on an index card because I am back doing Project Cookbook. I am back transferring all these wonderful keto recipes that I found in various places online. I've been transferring them to index cards, so my son has an index card file of things he can cook that are healthy, whole food things, and I'm using them too in the kitchen. Which leads us into the blather. As I told you, I am plateaued on my weight, but I am testing my glucose and my level of ketosis. Both of those are doing great. It's a wonderful feeling, but I'd like to be a lot thinner than I am. Still, I can't complain because I feel so much better. I sleep so much better. And as far as I can tell, the diabetic symptoms seem to have relented. I do get an occasional bit of joint pain. Meanwhile, Project G, there are a few cardboard cartons full of stuff in the garage, but the garage is actually clean. My son went in there last weekend and swept it out. And there's probably about 10 cardboard cartons with stuff in them sitting towards the front that I need to make decisions about. I'll be honest, I think the decision is they're going to go against the sidewall and follow us from home to home. Because, it's things like my paper journals, my husband's record disc collection, things like that we're not going to get rid of. The pup date, nothing new there. We still have to get Cap into the vet. Queenie needs a good grooming. That's what you get when you get a rough collie. And the Green Fingers report, I got to tell you, our yard is beautiful. It's covered with plants that apparently don't belong there. They're just invasive. They're all flowering. It's so pretty. So that's that. If you go to the show notes underneath this part in the blather, you're going to see our community resources. That is the Knit and Crochet Library for books I've used happily. And you can add to this. These are all on the Ravelry group for Cognitive. You can follow those links or just go over to Ravelry and look up our podcast group. There's a link to the list of things I like to buy to support my knitting and such. There's a list of the skills and techniques, links to demonstrate those. And the calendar, I'm not going to say much about it because it's pretty much what I've been saying. But it's usually the things that are going on in the crafty world here in the Santa Clarita Valley, which actually I'm not in the Santa Clarita Valley. I'm north of it on the mountainside, but that's where I tend to hang out. All of these things have links in Facebook, and if you go in the show notes in your local, you will see these things. So that's very nice. Meanwhile, Cognitive Fiber Retreat 10, as I've mentioned previously, will be on Saturday, September 28th, 2024 at the Courtyard by Marriott in Valencia. And the information, the link there is in the show notes. That does include a link to get discounted hotel rooms, so go get them. Romuald, I just got a nice gift at work. They gave me extra hours off of vacation every year now because I've been employed by them so long, which is really, really nice. So that's all pretty, but in the meantime, I had to reapply for all the days off I want. You should realize for CFR 10, I will take Friday the 27th off. I just want to boogie on over to the Courtyard, settle in my room, and have just a little more easy time to unwind at the hotel before you all arrive. And when some of you arrive early, as I love you and I know you will, we will have a little more time together. And it will stop that last minute frantic packing of goodie bags that goes on every year. And I always tell myself I'll head it off. But anyway, this leads me to say, yes, I'm taking that day off. And Romuald, so far I have applied for December 21st through the 29th. I don't think I'll be able to get the 30th and 31st, but I'd certainly like to. At any rate, I should have a 10-day break there and then 2 days of work and then January 1st. And Minerva gets the last word. Minerva's last word is going to be, Mom is wearing petticoats, it's raining outside, it's freezing in the house. Where on earth did spring go? None of us know. Minerva, you aren't the only one suffering on this one. But, having said that, Minerva would like you to remember that she loves us all. And we should be loving each other and acting as a community, because when we support our community, we do get more rights. We get more power when we act as a group. If you help your community is going to help you, folks. So please don't go individualistic on me. And having said that, remember, everybody, please take care of each other, stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.